Someone made you believe your pain had to stay quiet, didn't they? Vincent Callahan's voice was so calm that Danielle Brooks stopped breathing for a second. At 11:47 that night, the enormous Callahan kitchen should have been empty, nothing moving beneath the warm pendant lights except the second hand of the brass clock above the pantry door. Danielle had waited until the last housekeeper went upstairs before allowing herself to sit beside the marble island, still wearing her plain black uniform, one hand pressed over her mouth as tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She had spent 3 months learning how to become invisible inside this house. Tonight, she had failed. Vincent had returned nearly 2 hours earlier than expected. He entered through the private hallway without announcing himself, loosened the collar of his white dress shirt, and stopped when he heard a sound that did not belong in his carefully controlled home. Crying. Quiet crying. The kind meant not to be heard. He followed it into the kitchen and found Danielle sitting beneath the soft amber light, clutching a wrinkled white envelope so tightly that one corner had folded beneath her fingers. Danielle. She looked up sharply. Her dark eyes widened. Within seconds, she was standing, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand as though tears were another mess she had been hired to clean. Mr. Callahan, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were home. Vincent said nothing. He was 38 years old, a white man whose reputation had been built on noticing what other people missed, yet he had never seen Danielle look frightened before. Tired, yes. Quiet always. But not like this. What happened, he asked. Nothing, sir. You're crying. It's been a long day. She tried to smile, but her hand trembled as she reached for a glass beside the sink. It slipped against the marble with a soft clink. Vincent's eyes dropped to the envelope. Danielle immediately moved it behind her back. That small movement told him more than her answer had. He glanced toward the hallway. Danielle did too. Once. Then again, as if she expected someone to appear there. Something cold settled behind Vincent's ribs. He walked to the kitchen door. Danielle stiffened. He closed it, turned the lock, then removed the key and placed it openly on the marble island between them, close enough for her to reach. Mr. Callahan? Her voice was barely a whisper. Vincent stepped away from the door instead of toward her. The key stays there. Danielle stared at him. He had locked the door, but somehow the gesture did not feel like a trap. It felt like he was keeping something outside. Nobody is coming through that door until you want them to, he said. Her fingers tightened around the envelope. Vincent had spent years watching people lie across polished tables, and he knew fear when he saw it. Danielle was afraid, but not of him. She was afraid of being heard. Danielle. His voice softened. Who hurt you? Her eyes filled again. For several seconds, the only sound in the kitchen was the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then Danielle looked toward the locked door one final time before meeting his eyes. Someone you trust. Vincent did not move. For the first time that night, the silence belonged to him. 3 months earlier, Danielle Brooks had arrived at the Callahan estate carrying everything she needed for her first day inside a canvas tote bag that had belonged to her mother. The mansion stood beyond iron gates on several wooded acres outside New York City, all pale stone, tall windows, and carefully trimmed gardens, the kind of place where even silence seemed expensive. Danielle had not come looking for luxury. She had come looking for steady work. At 29, she had learned that pride did not pay utility bills, help her mother with groceries, or give her younger brother enough breathing room to finish community college without working every night. The housekeeping position offered reliable hours, health insurance, and more money than either of the 2 jobs Danielle had been juggling before. She intended to earn every dollar. Claire Whitmore, the household manager, met her near the service entrance that first morning. Claire was polished, efficient, and perfectly composed, with a tablet tucked beneath one arm and an expression that seemed capable of measuring a person before they finished introducing themselves. Mr. Callahan values privacy, Claire told her while guiding her through the staff corridor. Do your work well, stay out of private conversations, and never confuse employment with belonging. Danielle noticed the final sentence, but she only nodded. Understood. For the first few weeks, she did exactly that. She arrived early, worked quietly, and learned the rhythms of the enormous house. Vincent Callahan was usually gone before breakfast and often returned after dinner. When Danielle did see him, he passed through rooms surrounded by the quiet gravity of a man everyone noticed without being told to. He was always courteous to the staff, but distant. Danielle preferred it that way. Distance meant fewer complications. The unexpected complication was Ethan Callahan, Vincent's 11-year-old nephew, who spent most afternoons in the library while his tutor prepared lessons. Ethan had inherited the Callahan name, but none of the household's formality. He asked Danielle questions while she dusted bookshelves, told terrible jokes while she polished tables, and once spent 20 minutes explaining why the New York Yankees needed better pitching, as though Danielle personally controlled the roster. She listened because nobody else seemed to. Soon, Ethan began leaving a wrapped peppermint on her cleaning cart every Thursday because he had noticed she liked them. Danielle returned the favor by saving the sports section of the newspaper for him. It was harmless. Claire did not see it that way. "You are becoming familiar," she said one afternoon after finding Ethan laughing with Danielle near the breakfast room. "He is a child," Danielle replied gently. Claire's smile remained perfectly still. "He is a Callahan." After that, small things began changing. Danielle received the least convenient assignments. Mistakes she had not made appeared beside her name on staff reports. A missing set of linen napkins somehow became her responsibility. When Danielle questioned the report, Claire leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Good jobs are difficult to find when a former employer says you cannot be trusted." Danielle understood the message. So she swallowed her anger and kept working. She told herself she could endure cold words. She could endure unfair schedules. She could endure being treated as though speaking up was a privilege she had not earned. What Danielle did not know was that Claire was no longer satisfied with making her uncomfortable. Somewhere inside the Callahan estate, a document was already being prepared with Vincent's name at the bottom, and when Danielle finally saw it, silence would no longer feel like patience. It would feel like a cage. The kitchen returned around them in a rush of silence, and Vincent Callahan found himself staring at Danielle as though for simple words had rearranged the entire house. "Someone you trust." Danielle seemed to regret saying it immediately. Her gaze dropped to the marble island, and her fingers tightened around the wrinkled envelope until the paper crackled. Vincent did not ask for a name. Not yet. He had spent enough years around frightened people to know that pressure could make the truth retreat deeper. Instead, he pulled out a chair several feet away and sat down, leaving the key exactly where he had placed it. "Show me the envelope." Danielle shook her head. "Please, Mr. Callahan. I should not have said anything." "Why?" "Because I need this job." There it was again. Not anger. Not accusation. Survival. Vincent looked at the envelope. "Does that have something to do with your job?" Danielle remained silent. The refrigerator hummed behind them. Somewhere beyond the locked door, the old grandfather clock in the main hall marked midnight. Finally, Danielle placed the envelope on the island and pushed it toward him. Vincent opened it carefully. The first line made his expression change. It was an official notice of termination bearing the Callahan household letterhead. Danielle Brooks was accused of theft, repeated misconduct, and inappropriate familiarity with members of the family. Her employment would end Saturday morning. Vincent read the page twice. Then his eyes moved to the bottom. Vincent Alexander Callahan. His name. His signature. Except it was not his signature. "Where did you get this?" His voice had become very quiet. "It was left in my locker this afternoon." "Who gave it to you?" "Nobody. It was already there." Vincent set the paper flat beneath the pendant light. Whoever had prepared it knew the household formatting, knew how official correspondence looked, and had access to a digital copy of his signature. That reduced the possibilities considerably. "I did not sign this." Danielle looked up. For the first time, confusion pushed through her fear. "What? I have never seen this document before tonight." She stared at him as if she were trying to decide whether believing him would make things better or worse. But Claire said. Danielle stopped. Vincent caught the name. He did not react. "What did Claire say?" Danielle swallowed. "She said you had finally been informed about my behavior. She said you agreed I was becoming a problem." Vincent felt something colder than anger settle inside him. Claire Whitmore had managed his household for nearly 6 years. She controlled schedules, payroll records, staff evaluations, and access to private areas of the estate. He had trusted her because everything appeared orderly. Now he wondered what that order had cost people he had never bothered to ask. "How long has this been happening?" Danielle's eyes moved toward the locked door. "The schedules started changing about 2 months ago. Then the complaints. Things would disappear, and somehow my name would end up attached to them. Every time I tried to explain, I was reminded how easily a bad reference could follow me. Why did you not come to me? Danielle gave him a tired look that struck harder than any accusation could have. People like me do not usually get private meetings with people like you, Mr. Callahan. Vincent had no answer. Danielle looked down at the false termination letter. And after a while, I understood something. What? He asked. Her voice was steady now. This was never about getting me fired. Vincent waited. Danielle lifted her eyes to his. She wanted me scared enough to leave on my own. Vincent did not sleep that night. By 6 the next morning, pale winter light had begun spreading across the windows of his study, turning the dark wood walls gray at the edges. Danielle's termination letter lay centered on his desk beside 3 genuine documents bearing his signature. The difference was small enough to fool someone who had never watched him sign his name, but obvious to Vincent. Whoever had created the letter had access to more than household stationery. They had access to him. At 7:15, Marcus Reed, Vincent's head of security, entered the study carrying a tablet and a cup of black coffee. Marcus had worked for Vincent for 9 years and understood that questions were unnecessary when Vincent looked this calm. I need an internal review, Vincent said. Quietly, Marcus glanced at the letter. Of what? Staff records from the last 12 months. Resignations, complaints, payroll adjustments, disciplinary reports. Everything. Claire manages those files. I know. Marcus studied him for a moment, then nodded. By noon, the first pattern appeared. 2 housekeepers had resigned within 6 months. One had been accused of damaging expensive glassware. Another had supposedly ignored repeated instructions. A gardener named Samuel Price had lost several days of pay after being blamed for missing equipment. A kitchen assistant named Rosa Martinez had left after receiving 3 disciplinary notices in 2 weeks. Every report had passed through Claire Whitmore. Every report had seemed ordinary when viewed alone. Together, they looked different. Vincent sat behind his desk reading names he barely remembered. That realization disturbed him more than the paperwork. These people had entered his home every morning, kept it functioning, prepared meals, maintained rooms, cared for grounds, and disappeared from his life without him ever asking why. He had mistaken efficiency for fairness, order for decency, silence for proof that nothing was wrong. Marcus placed another file on the desk. There is more. Payroll records showed that Danielle's schedule had been altered 17 times in 8 weeks, usually with less than 24 hours of notice. Her complaints had never reached Vincent's office. Claire had marked each one resolved. Did Danielle ever receive a formal warning from me? Vincent asked. No. Did anyone request authorization to terminate her? No. Vincent leaned back slowly. Through the window, he could see Danielle crossing the rear courtyard carrying folded towels toward the guest wing. Even from a distance, she moved with the same careful purpose she always had. No scene, no accusation, no attempt to gain his sympathy. She had returned to work that morning as though midnight in the kitchen had never happened. Marcus followed Vincent's gaze. What do you want me to do? Vincent was silent for several seconds. Nothing yet. Marcus looked surprised. You have enough to confront Claire. I have enough to know something is wrong. That is not the same thing as knowing everything. Vincent looked back at the reports. There was another possibility he could no longer ignore. Claire had not invented this kind of control overnight. If she had treated Danielle this way, perhaps Danielle was simply the first person who had stayed long enough for Vincent to notice. Later that afternoon, Marcus returned with one final discovery. The digital copy of Vincent's signature used on Danielle's false letter had been accessed from the household administration account 3 days earlier. Only 2 senior employees had authorization to use it. Marcus was one. Claire was the other. Vincent closed the file. For years, people had called him observant because he could walk into a room and recognize who held influence before anyone spoke. Yet inside his own home, someone had been borrowing his authority to frighten people who depended on their paychecks. The cruelty had not required his permission. It had only required his absence. And Vincent Callahan was beginning to understand that looking away could become its own kind of permission. By late afternoon, Vincent had made his decision. Claire would be confronted quietly and privately before dinner. He had the false letter, the access records, the altered schedules, and enough unanswered complaints to know that waiting carried its own cost. He was halfway across the West Hall when Danielle stepped out of the laundry room and saw the folder beneath his arm. Something in his expression must have told her where he was going. Mr. Callahan. Vincent stopped. Danielle hesitated, then crossed the polished floor toward him. Are you going to speak with Claire? Yes. Please do not. The answer caught him completely off guard. She forged my signature on a document designed to frighten you out of your job. I know. She manipulated your schedule and buried your complaints. I know that too. Vincent studied her. Then why are you asking me to wait? Danielle looked toward the tall windows. Snow had begun falling beyond the glass, soft flakes disappearing against the dark lawn. Last week, Claire left her phone in the staff room. It kept ringing. I was not trying to read anything, but the hospital name was on the screen. Vincent said nothing. Her father is sick, Danielle continued. He lives in Pennsylvania. She has been paying for a home health aide and driving almost 3 hours each way whenever she gets a day off. Vincent's expression did not soften. That does not excuse what she did. I did not say it did. Danielle's voice was quiet, but there was no trembling in it now. Understanding why somebody became cruel is not the same as pretending the cruelty did not happen. That sentence stopped him. Danielle folded her hands in front of her. She was terrified of losing control because control is the only thing she thinks is keeping her life together. Then Ethan started spending time with me. You started asking the kitchen staff whether things were running well. I think she saw every new connection as a threat. So you want me to forgive her? No, Danielle finally met his eyes. I want you to be fair. Vincent almost laughed at the strange weight of those words. The woman Claire had humiliated was standing before him asking for fairness on Claire's behalf. Danielle, she tried to take away your livelihood. Then make her answer for that. Just do not take away hers because you are angry for me. The hallway went still. Vincent had spent most of his adult life around people who understood power as leverage. If someone threatened your position, you removed the threat. If someone embarrassed you, you made certain they never tried again. Danielle understood something different. Accountability. Without humiliation. Consequences without cruelty. You were crying because of her last night, he said. Yes. And you are protecting her today. Danielle shook her head. No. I am protecting the kind of person I want to remain. Vincent looked down at the folder in his hand. For the first time since Marcus had confirmed the forged signature, his anger no longer seemed useful. Danielle had not asked him to rescue her. She had asked him to see clearly. There was a difference. What would you do, he asked. Danielle seemed surprised. If this were your decision. She considered the question carefully. Give her one chance to tell the truth when telling the truth costs her something. Vincent's eyes narrowed slightly. And if she lies? Danielle looked toward the dining room doors at the end of the hall. Then you will know exactly who she chose to be. Vincent remained silent for a moment, then closed the folder. The private confrontation would not happen. Instead, he began thinking about dinner, about witnesses, about 2 signatures placed side by side beneath bright light, and about a woman who believed Danielle would always lower her eyes. Tonight, Claire Whitmore would be given the chance Danielle had asked for. Vincent only wondered whether she would recognize it before it disappeared. By 7:30 that evening, the Callahan dining room glowed beneath 2 crystal chandeliers while snow gathered against the tall windows. Vincent sat at the head of the long walnut table with Ethan on his right and Marcus several seats away. Claire moved through the room with her usual precision, checking place settings and quietly directing the staff as though the day had been entirely ordinary. Danielle carried in a silver coffee service and placed it on the sideboard. Claire barely looked at her. Vincent noticed that too. He waited until dinner was nearly finished before setting down his water glass. Claire, I need your help with something. She turned immediately. Of course, Mr. Callahan. Vincent reached beside his chair and placed a cream-colored folder on the table. Danielle recognized it. Her hands became still around the coffee pot. There appears to be a problem with an employee record, Vincent said. Claire's expression did not change. Which employee? Danielle Brooks. The room seemed to shrink around the name. Ethan glanced toward Danielle, confused. Claire folded her hands calmly. There have been several concerns regarding Danielle's conduct. What concerns? Missing household property. Failure to follow instructions. Inappropriate familiarity with members of the family. Vincent looked at Ethan. Has Danielle ever behaved inappropriately with you? Ethan frowned. No. She talks baseball with me. Claire's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Vincent returned his attention to her. And the missing property. There were linen napkins and several smaller items. Were they found? A pause. Some were. Where? Claire hesitated. I would need to check the records. Vincent nodded once. I already did. Silence settled over the table. Danielle remained beside the sideboard, her eyes steady now. Vincent opened the folder and removed the termination notice. Did you prepare this? Claire looked at the paper. That appears to be the notice authorized for Danielle's dismissal. Authorized by whom? By you. Vincent leaned back. When did I authorize it? For the first time, Claire's composure shifted. I believe it was earlier this week. Monday. Possibly. I was in Chicago on Monday. Then Tuesday. I returned Tuesday night. Claire swallowed. Perhaps the authorization was sent electronically. Vincent let the silence remain long enough for everyone in the room to feel it. Then he removed a second document from the folder and placed it beside the first. This is a contract I signed yesterday morning. He turned both pages toward Claire. Look at the signatures. Her face lost color. The false signature curved too smoothly through the final letters. Vincent's genuine signature ended with a short upward stroke, a habit unchanged since college. Even Ethan could see the difference. Claire looked toward Danielle. It happened for less than a second, but Vincent caught it. Do not look at her for an answer, he said quietly. Claire turned back. I can explain. I hope you can. Vincent's voice remained controlled. Because someone accessed the digital copy of my signature 3 days ago. Someone changed Danielle's schedule 17 times in 8 weeks. Someone buried her complaints and created accusations that were never properly investigated. Claire's breathing became shallow. I was protecting this household. From what? Vincent asked. Claire looked toward Danielle again, and something harder entered her expression. From employees who forget their place. The words landed softly, but the room changed. Danielle did not lower her eyes. Vincent looked at her, then back at Claire. Danielle had given this woman one chance to tell the truth when truth would cost something. Claire had chosen differently. Vincent folded his hands on the table. Then perhaps, he said, we should finally discuss what you believe Danielle's place is. Claire stood perfectly still beside the dining table, but the confidence that had carried her through 6 years in the Callahan household was beginning to fracture. Danielle is an employee, she said carefully. There have to be boundaries. Vincent glanced toward Danielle, who remained beside the sideboard with both hands resting calmly in front of her. There are boundaries, he said. There is also dignity. You seem to have confused the two. Claire drew a slow breath. You do not understand how difficult it is to manage this staff. If people become too comfortable, standards disappear. Did Danielle's work fall below standard? Claire hesitated. That is not the point. It is exactly the point. Vincent slid the false termination notice across the table. You accused her of theft without evidence. You altered her schedule repeatedly. You threatened her employment references. Then you used my name to make your decision look like mine. Claire's eyes moved around the room, searching for somewhere safe to land. They finally stopped on Danielle. She is just a maid. The sentence was quiet, almost casual. That made it worse. Ethan lowered his eyes. Marcus became motionless. Vincent did not raise his voice. Look at her. Claire blinked. Excuse me. You have spoken about Danielle all evening. Now look at her. Claire slowly turned. Danielle met her gaze without anger, without triumph, and without the lowered eyes Claire had grown accustomed to seeing. Vincent's voice remained calm behind them. Tell her what you did. Claire's lips parted, but nothing came out. Vincent, please. This is not about me. The room went silent again. Danielle could have filled that silence with every humiliation she had swallowed for 2 months. She could have demanded Claire lose everything. Instead, she waited. Finally, Claire looked directly at her. I changed your schedules. Her voice trembled. I wrote the complaints. I prepared the termination letter. Danielle's expression remained steady. Why? Claire looked down. Because Ethan trusted you. The staff liked you. People started coming to you when they had problems instead of coming to me. She swallowed. I thought I was losing control. Danielle waited until Claire looked up again. You were afraid, she said. Yes. So was I. Those 3 words seemed to carry more weight than anything Vincent could have said. Claire's eyes filled with shame. I am sorry. Vincent turned toward Danielle. What would make this right? The question surprised everyone, including her. Danielle looked at Claire, then at the staff members standing quietly near the walls. First, every complaint filed against me gets reviewed properly. So do the complaints against anyone who left because of her. Vincent nodded. Done. Any wages that were unfairly withheld should be returned. Done. Danielle paused. And nobody here should have to choose between keeping a paycheck and keeping their dignity. Vincent looked toward Marcus. Create a confidential reporting system outside household management. Every employee gets access. No retaliation, no exceptions. Marcus nodded. Claire seemed to brace herself. Am I fired? Vincent looked at Danielle, but Danielle shook her head slightly. This decision belonged to him. He understood. You are suspended from management duties while every record is reviewed. What happens after that will depend on what we find and whether you accept responsibility for it. Claire nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. There was no public destruction, no celebration, no revenge. Only consequences. Danielle picked up the coffee pot again, but Vincent stopped her with one quiet sentence. Not tonight. She looked at him. You are finished working for the evening. Danielle almost protested out of habit, then stopped herself. She set the pot down. For the first time since entering the Callahan estate 3 months earlier, she walked out of the dining room without lowering her eyes, and every person in that room understood that nothing about her place in the house had changed. What had changed was whether they were finally willing to see it. Danielle found Vincent in the kitchen just after 10 the next morning, standing beside the same marble island where everything had changed. Sunlight poured through the tall windows now, replacing the shadows of that midnight conversation with a clean winter brightness. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Danielle noticed the small brass key resting beside Vincent's coffee cup, the same key he had placed within her reach the night before. I have been thinking about that, she said. Vincent followed her gaze. The key. The door. His expression became thoughtful. Danielle stepped closer to the island, though she kept several feet between them. When you locked it, I was scared. I know. Then you put the key in front of me. Vincent wrapped one hand around his coffee cup, but did not drink. You kept looking toward the hallway. Danielle became still. I noticed it before you gave me the letter. Every time I asked what was wrong, you checked that doorway. His voice softened. You were not afraid of being alone in the kitchen with me. You were afraid someone else would walk in. Danielle remembered the sound of Claire's shoes in the staff corridor, the instinctive tension that had followed her for weeks, the constant fear that even a private conversation might somehow become another accusation. So you locked her out. I locked everyone out. Vincent looked at the key. But I needed you to know I was not locking you in. Danielle's eyes lifted to his. Suddenly, that small gesture carried a meaning she had been too frightened to understand at the time. Vincent had not demanded trust from her. He had given her control over whether the door remained closed. You could have just asked me to trust you, Danielle said. That would have been easier. For me, Vincent replied. Not for you. The answer settled between them. Danielle had known powerful people who believed their intentions were enough. That saying they meant well somehow erased the fear their authority created. Vincent had done something different. He had recognized that safety could not simply be announced by the person holding the power. It had to be felt by the person without it. Why did you care? She asked. Vincent looked toward the windows. At first, because someone used my name. He paused. Then I started reading the records. Danielle waited. Samuel Price worked here for 4 years. Rosa Martinez worked here for 2. I could barely remember their faces. His jaw tightened. I knew every detail of the business outside these walls, but I did not know what was happening to people 10 rooms away from my office. You did not write those complaints. No, you did not threaten anyone. No, Danielle tilted her head. Then do not take responsibility for Claire's choices. Vincent looked back at her. I am responsible for mine. I gave her authority and never asked what she was doing with it. Danielle understood then that the investigation had changed something deeper than a household policy. Vincent had spent years believing responsibility ended where his direct actions ended. Now he was beginning to see that power created obligations, even in silence. Claire asked to speak with me this morning, Danielle said. Vincent's expression sharpened. Do you want Marcus there? No. She apologized again. This time nobody was watching. Did you accept it? Danielle considered the question. I told her forgiveness and trust are different things. A faint change touched Vincent's face, almost a smile. That sounds like you. Danielle smiled too, then looked again at the brass key. You know, Mr. Callahan, sometimes people do not need somebody powerful to fight every battle for them. I am beginning to understand that. Sometimes they just need one door where they can finally tell the truth. Vincent picked up the key, walked to the kitchen door, and left it unlocked. 1 month later, at exactly 11:47 at night, Vincent Callahan passed the kitchen and heard a sound that made him stop in the hallway. Laughter. He stood outside the open doorway for a moment, almost surprised by how unfamiliar it sounded in a house that had spent years perfecting silence. Inside, Danielle sat at the marble island with Rosa Martinez, who had accepted an offer to return after her disciplinary record was cleared and her withheld wages were restored. Samuel Price had received his missing pay as well, along with a written correction to his employment record. Marcus had completed the review of every staff complaint from the previous year, and the new confidential reporting system now existed outside the authority of any single household manager. Claire remained away from management duties while completing the accountability process Vincent had established. Nothing had been erased. Nothing had been hidden. But nobody had been publicly destroyed to make justice feel satisfying. Danielle noticed Vincent standing in the doorway. "Are you planning to stay out there all night?" Rosa immediately straightened. "Good night, Mr. Callahan." She gathered her coffee cup and disappeared toward the staff corridor with a smile Danielle tried unsuccessfully to hide. Vincent entered the kitchen. "I think I frightened her." "You frighten most people." "Do I frighten you?" Danielle considered him for a second. "Not tonight." Vincent almost smiled. On the counter sat a folder he had given her that afternoon. Inside was an offer for a newly created position overseeing employee relations and staff welfare. It came with better pay, regular hours, and direct access to the independent reporting system. Danielle had not accepted immediately. That had surprised him. "Have you decided?" he asked. "Almost. What is stopping you?" Danielle turned the folder toward him. "One condition." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "You are negotiating with me now? I learned from watching you." "That sounds dangerous." Her smile faded into something more thoughtful. "I do not want a position created just because I happen to be the person you finally noticed. If this job exists, it needs to protect whoever comes after me too." Vincent looked at the folder. "It will. Even if I leave someday." "Even then." Danielle nodded. "Then I accept." No ceremony followed. No applause. Vincent simply extended his hand across the island. Danielle shook it. A month earlier, she had stood in this exact room trying to hide her tears because she believed keeping her paycheck required keeping her pain invisible. Now she had negotiated the terms of a job designed to make sure nobody else in the house would face the same choice. Vincent released her hand and noticed something near the sink. The brass key. It had remained there even though the kitchen door had not been locked since that night. "You kept it," he said. Danielle glanced at it. "It reminds me of something." "What?" "That a closed door can mean two very different things depending on who controls the key." Vincent absorbed the words quietly. Danielle poured a second cup of coffee and placed it across from her. He sat down. Outside, the estate rested beneath a clear winter sky. Inside, the kitchen looked exactly as it had 1 month earlier. The same marble, the same warm lights, the same clock moving toward midnight. But Danielle was not the same woman who had sat there crying. And Vincent was no longer the man who believed protecting people meant deciding everything for them. He had finally learned that real power was not proven by how quickly a person could take control. Sometimes it was proven by knowing when to give control back. Danielle lifted her coffee, her eyes steady, her place at the table no longer something anyone else could define for her. And in the quietest room of his enormous house, Vincent finally understood what dignity looked like when it no longer had to ask permission.